Coming up in the news, an update tonight on national health insurance. A call for greater protection of the nation's children. And more Cuban migrants rescued at sea.
The Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I'm Shashina Rule-Farquharson. As always, it is so great to have you with us. Topping news this evening, the Public Hospitals Authority observing World Health Day under the theme Universal Healthcare Coverage, Everyone, Everywhere. During a special forum, the chairman of the National Health Insurance Authority gave an update on the Bahamas government's developing implementation of national health insurance.
We do care.
Chairman of the National Health Insurance Authority, Dr. Robin Roberts, says they are working hard to make national health insurance a reality for all. As the featured speaker at the Brand Memorial Hospital's World Health Day ceremony, he says that there are many who cannot afford health care, and NHI seeks to correct that, beginning with primary care.
Because when you go to that first person, they can pick that condition up very early. They can make that diagnosis and treat it very early before it has an opportunity to expand into something big. And so it's a means, and on top of that, your primary care is someone who you can continue to be in contact with.
But with limited funds and resources, and with what he called a tsunami of diseases and premature deaths due to certain illnesses, he shared what is being covered outside of primary care.
We looked at cancers. We looked at those conditions related to heart disease. We looked at this problem with kidney disease and people going on the kidney machine. So we couldn't cover all the cancers, so we looked at the most common ones. So we look at breast cancer in women. We look at cervical cancer in women. In men, we look at prostate cancer. And then we look at colon cancers that affect both men and women. And then later on, because of the numbers being relatively small, we have included cancers in our children under the age of 12 as well to be covered.
And just who will pay for national health insurance? Employers will now be mandated to ensure that employees have health insurance. Dr. Roberts adds each person's coverage will cost $1,000 annually and shares how it will work.
You're making $5,000 a year. You only pay $6 a month. $10,000, $13. $20,000, $25. So in those instances now, the employer will be paying the extra to make your $84. If you're making the big bucks, $65,000, $66,000, then you could pay the whole $84, and the employer wouldn't have to pay anything for you. So those who can pay more, pay a little more, and those who can pay less, then we help them along the way. The government now puts in their $1,000. So for all my senior citizens, all my retirees, my children, okay, the disabled, they can now apply for national health insurance, so the government will cover their $1,000 so that they are covered.
He says universal health care is also all about sustainability and says this can only happen through pooling funds, bettering public sector facilities, public-private partnerships, and reasonable insurance rates. In other news, April is recognized as Child Protection Month, and the Department of Social Services is mounting an aggressive campaign to spread awareness as they seek to do their part to stop the cycle of abuse. Tonight, the Assistant Director is taking a critical look at the long-term effects of the various forms of abuse and is advising parents and guardians to remain vigilant as it is their responsibility to protect the children. Megan Shepard has more.
Child abuse, whether it be verbal, physical, mental, emotional, or sexual, can have long-term effects on a person well into adulthood. During the month of April, the Department of Social Services will shed light on the heart-wrenching cases they deal with in their line of work. Assistant Director Paula Marshall notes that everyone in society has heard either a parent or another adult speak to a child in a cringe-worthy manner. She says these words can last a lifetime.
sometimes you hear the things that they say, and it's as if the children have no feelings. And so the impact of this kind of barrage of demeaning words and curses that is levied at our children can really destroy their self-confidence. So to rebuild that confidence, it takes a lot of work. And in some cases, it never occurs.
In 2018, 11 cases of physical abuse were reported on Grand Bahama, and she says that this extends beyond the legalized forms of discipline.
But when the beatings become excessive, when the beatings create cuts and bruises in the child's flesh, people must realize that those bruises go deeper than just the flesh. It scars the heart, the mind, the emotions. And so, unfortunately, there have been times when children who have been physically abused over a long period of time have come back to the attention of the community as murderers and other persons who have hurt other people. So when we talk about the long-term effects of these things, we're not only talking about how it is going to affect the individual for now and how it will affect just that family. You're talking about the effects on the whole society.
When it comes to sexual abuse, 24 cases were reported on Grand Bahama.
We have the problem of incest, where family members take it upon themselves to use the opportunity to have sexual activity with other persons in their homes. And I'm talking about males and females. So the fact that our children are being exposed to sexual activity before they are even physically or mentally able to even to deal with that is a serious abuse that scars them sometimes for life. The amount of children who become pregnant within our community who are under the age of 16, that is really called statutory rape. But it's rape nonetheless.
Marshall says that children must heal from all forms of abuse, or else the cycle will continue when they become parents one day.
If the only thing they know is to be abusive verbally, to be abusive sexually, to be abusive, physically, then what do you expect them to do with their own children? So if we do not stop the cycle of abuse, then in essence, by not dealing with it, we are encouraging it.
Marshall is challenging those in the community to speak up and stand against child abuse rather than turning a blind eye. Megan Shepard, ZNS Network News.
Well, in recognition of Child Protection Month, the Department of Social Services will host a number of events to raise awareness on the forms of abuse taking place in our communities. A number of these initiatives are also geared towards educating students and creating safe environments for them to express their concerns. Senior Welfare Officer attached to School Welfare, Brenda Mae Cooper, says that for 2 weeks they will visit various schools to discuss prevalent issues facing students today.
We do know that a lot of what we're seeing in the school system did not originate in the schools, so we want to be able to address all of these matters with our students. We know that we have to take a village approach, because socialization begins first in the homes. So there's a component for parents and guardians to be responsible, and then there's the school, there's the government, there's the community. So we just basically want to come together and be able to share on these pertinent issues so our students can be better students, so they can be productive citizens of our country.
Chief Welfare Officer Jody Burrows adding that they will also host workshops to educate the adults charged with protecting children. A workshop for social workers, police, and educators will take place on April 25th, followed by a community walkabout on April 26th.
Our speaker will be Mrs. Kayla Green Smith. She is speaking from the Act, Child Protection Act, to bring awareness to not only child abuse, however, in addition to that, the proceedings, the act. She's going to go through the act with us. When we have reports made in the school, oftentimes The persons who a child tells about their abuse, the initial person, does not know where to go from there. They may tell this person and that person and not necessarily the correct person. And so therefore, those matters sometimes fall through the cracks. And in an attempt to avoid that, we want to bring awareness to these persons who are responsible for our children.
The public is also invited to attend a public lecture on child abuse, and that's on April 29th at 7 p.m. at the Foster B. Pistina Center. Well, it's been 1 week now since the Oasis of the Seas cruise ship was damaged in an accident at the Grand Bahamas shipyard. Reports say a crane slammed into the vessel while work was being done to that cruise ship. In a recent interview with ZNS News, the Deputy Prime Minister gave an update on the situation, and he had some stern advice to residents. Italia Hall has the details.
The Oasis of the Seas is making way across the Atlantic for destination Spain, where it will be serviced at facilities in Cadiz before the mega ship resumes its scheduled itinerary, beginning on May 5th, sailing from Barcelona. ZNS News has learned that following the accident at the ship care facility on April 1st, the Oasis of the Seas incurred damage to its aqua theater and some of its suites. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest says the fact that the cruise ship was able to leave the dock following that accident is certainly good news.
I'm sure that the shipyard, as well as the port department, who has launched its own review of the circumstances, will do their due diligence and eventually will report to the Bahamian people as to what has happened and what may be the mitigating or issues or actions that need to be taken in order to ensure that this kind of thing does not happen again. Again, we thank the Lord that no major injuries occurred as a result of it.
Now the Oasis of the Seas is owned by Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, which recently signed a letter of intent for the sale of the Grand Lucayne Resort. When asked if the incident can have an impact on the current negotiations for the sale of the hotel, the Deputy Prime Minister responded,
They would have to respond to that, but my understanding is that they were covered by insurance, and so we would hope and expect that they wouldn't have a significant impact on that.
But the DPM says he is concerned about the amount of deliberate misinformation that was circulated during the unfortunate event, and he's asking Bahamians to be more responsible.
Let's be mindful that these are brothers and sisters and mothers and aunts and sisters. You know, we have to be responsible with the information that we put out. I know everybody wants to be the one to break news, but let's report facts. And then to the extent that you want to bring forth new information, at the very least say that, you know, I am unsure, that I heard, so that people can at least have that in their mind, rather than making these definitive statements that appear to be fact and causing panic.
The accident resulted in the loss of Dock 2, which is said to be significant for the shipyard since it is the primary dock for cruise ship repairs. It's Halia Hall, ZNS Network News.
An apparent uptick in Cuban migrants apprehended at sea as another group was rescued on Sal Island in Bahamian waters, the third group in less than a week. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter handing over the 8 Cuban migrants to immigration officers yesterday afternoon at the Freeport harbor. The migrants, all men, claimed that they departed Cuba last Thursday in a rustic vessel destined for the United States, but were intercepted by the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Robert Yare near Sal Island. The migrants are expected to be flown to New Providence to await repatriation. Another group of Cuban males, 11 in total, were picked up at sea this past Friday and brought to Grand Bahama. They have since been flown to the detention center, and last Monday, April 1st, 17 Cuban migrants, 14 adult males, 2 adult females, and a female minor were handed over to immigration officials. They too were found by the U.S. Coast Guard in the area of Sal Island. Stay with us, there's more news right after the break.